so I know a lot about cinematography and movies. As seen in history, filmmaking has evolved due to the different techniques and processes involved. The history of movies is quite astonishing when you look at it, and you look at the numbers. The history of the formats, specifically as seen before you, started out with the VHS, which all of you remember takes forever to rewind, and you have to do it every time you watch a movie. That actually led into the DVD, which is still very, very popular today. The DVD is somewhat kind of taken a backseat though recently to the Blu-ray, which has better graphics, it's more visually appealing. The movie numbers. The total number of movies is actually over 2 million different titles. That means there's over 2 million different movies that have come out. The highest grossing movie of all time would actually kind of shock people. It's Gone with the Wind, and it has grossed over $1.5 billion. And when you think about a movie that came out in the early 1900s, it has actually made more money back then when you compare the rates than a movie today. And then when you look at the history, you got to look at the progression of the cameras. You start out with the Betacam, extremely old, extremely bulky. Then you moved on to the Video 8, which was probably more popular in the 1990s, early 2000s. And then you went to the Super VHS. That has progressed. It actually didn't last long. Then you went to the HDV, which is actually still prevalent today. Still a lot of cameras have it, but we've moved away from that. Then you've moved into the XD cam, which is what many of the cameras that we use today are. And then more recently, we've kind of seen a progression towards the 3D. We've seen a lot of marketing, especially with Sony. They marketed 3D, and a lot of movies recently have come out in 3D, which is very popular. Now that I've told you about the history of the movies and the progression of the formats and different types of cameras, I'm going to tell you a little about the results of those progressions. The progression of movies has allowed movie makers to use so many different techniques. For example, the camera shots. There are many, many different camera shots when working and trying to create a film. You start off with the long shot, which is the ones where they usually start off with a grand scheme. It's very long away, you see a bigger picture. Then you move into a full shot, which is closer, more full body. It's not very far away, it's not close up yet. Then you move up to the close up, which is usually chest and above, usually face. Then you have the aerial shots, which is actually very, very popular in action films. When starting out, it's similar to a long shot, but it's actually from above, so you see the grander picture, the layout. Then there's over the shoulder, which is used mostly when when you're filming, a conversation or something. Usually you'll do it over the shoulder, that way you can see the person that is talking to you, and then you'll see the person that they are talking to. And then when talking about those, you have to talk about the genres. Many, many different genres. There's actually genres that are still being created, maybe not as well known, but they're still very, very prevalent. There you have the action films, the comedies, the horrors, the romantic comedies. There's different variations of all those, and they've actually kind of been twisted sometimes to incorporate more than one. And when it comes to genres, it's actually based on settings and emotions and topics. And so when you're creating a genre, like I said, you can create many different, it doesn't have to just be action, or just be horror. You can actually incorporate different ones to create incorporate two of those to make just one. Now that you've learned a little about the basic techniques of movie making, I'll tell you about the process movie makers go through to make those movies that you love so much. There's such a large process that directors or movie makers must go through to create a movie. First, they have to go through the story. So they have to have an idea of what they want to make a movie about. Then they go through the script, which is actually a very long process. They usually hire someone outside outside. It's usually not the person that comes up with the story. They actually hire someone outside. They give the idea to them and they ask them to write a script.